don't want to inadvertently make the situation worse by virtue of trying to make it better. I always like to end with this, kind of the big picture. I teased this a little in the beginning. I would really challenge you to view any AIS in the water body as one of the stressors to the water body. And when we can build resilient ecosystems through things like nutrient mitigation in the watershed, shoreline, healthy native plantings, doing AIS prevention procedures, it really can go a long way. And if you have a really resilient ecosystem, it's better able to absorb stressors like a new invasive species than a system that is already degraded. And I think Beulah is in a really good spot. Garo was mentioning he sees plants here that he doesn't see in any other southeast Wisconsin lake. You guys have a really good plant community, and I want you to keep that in mind and try and keep that going. I think there's maybe just one more. It's just a plug for the shoreline program. I think that's left over from another talk, but it's a grant program if people want to do healthy native plantings along the shoreline and things. Thank you. A bit of a long-winded, but
changing subjects, but taking advantage of new deems, et cetera. And as I think you know, we're considering implementing we don't currently have a clean water program.
yes,
But we're considering implementing one next year. What's your perspective on the importance and benefits of it?
yeah, absolutely. I think in general, yes, supportive of the Clean Boats, Clean Waters program, particularly in the really busy parts of the state where you may get out-of-state visitors as well, who may not be as familiar with Wisconsin laws, right? Now that being said, I am sensitive to the fact that, and I hear this from a lot of groups, that Clean Boats, Clean Waters has been around for a long time. There's a lot of saturation maybe out there, right? And there's a lot of times where folks are like, yeah, I know, I've heard it, or whatever. That being said, the presence of a person there with branding on, giving a concerted message is important. And it may not hit everyone, but it does hit some people, and that in itself is worth it. The other thing that's really valuable is they're not just doing that messaging, you're also collecting where voters have been, right? And so that data is really useful, and there's actually a tool on our webpage, I think it's a little out of date, it doesn't have the most recent year's data, where you can download that info and show, yeah, we've got lakes coming from here and here and here to our water body, and it can help you make decisions based on that. So yes, it's worthwhile, but may not be the perfect fit in every scenario, right? I've done Clean Boats work myself, of course, and I've done it on the Great Lakes on a busy marina on a Saturday. You can't, it's a war zone in there basically. You can't have enough time to talk to someone before they're trying to get out of the way of the next person. So there's some nuance there, but overall supportive, particularly because you can get grants from the state that'll kind of pay for it, non-compete grants every year to fund it. And I know you guys were experimenting, and that's a really good approach, honestly, to do that before you bite off a grant, just to see how it's going, having the water. So.
Additional questions? You got the expert for it.
Did I stump you too much?
To tell you the truth, it's better than what you thought.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, it's you hear about all the terrible.
Great.
So it's good. It's still not great.
And that's,
but it's definitely.
you're absolutely right. I've seen, we're up to 45 some lakes with starry stonewort in Wisconsin. None of them by any means are, dead or dying or anything like that. It is something to consider in your management, but it's not something that's gonna, necessarily be the horrible thing that oftentimes we think it is. I think we did too good of a job, honestly, 20, 30 years ago in messaging some of this and making it seem a little too scary, because then you can kind of have some, knee-jerk reactions. When we want to be able to take a measured approach, look at the science, and then make a decision.
Yeah, because I just remember when Little Mosquito was all of them. It seemed like that thing was talking.
I was there recently, it's doing all right, so, yeah.
Does starry stonewort affect the fish habitat? Like, is it problematic for fish for spawning, for reproduction, or they don't really care?
Great question, and actually that's something that is part of why I started doing some of that underwater filming work, because there's one paper from I think 2008 from the state of Michigan where they observed and kind of posited, it's almost speculative, there's not a lot of hard data in the study, that starry stonewort growth in shallow areas would crowd out spawning. They wouldn't be able to make beds essentially. I kind of have two issues with that. One, most fish are spawning before starry stonewort really starts growing. That's one thing I forgot to mention, it's a later species, so it'll probably start picking up around July and then it'll last through September. So a little bit later than a lot of our native, or traditional aquatic species. So there's that one study, it's been cited a lot. So that doesn't match my and others kind of professionals' observations in the field where we see fish amongst it, we've been filming them and things like that. And just thinking about what I know, I'm a very avid fisherman myself. Whenever you see a bed, it doesn't matter what was around there. That fish is clearing out darn near everything. And so I think it has the potential to, but it is not something that I'm personally overly concerned with.
So you'd have to have a whole choked off lake in order for it to really be problematic.
Essentially, yeah. And most fish are spring spawners when there's not really a lot of plants going anyhow. So I just don't think it's as big of a concern as it may be cited in the literature. Really good question though.
Is it better to remove them when it's not growing? Like is it more dormant kind of thing?
Sure.
Versus when it's growing, you can see it, like mark it for next,
Yeah, like mark the spot essentially. Possibly. There's a few considerations there. The one being, when the plants die back for the year, those bulbils will stay all winter, and they'll be the thing that makes a new plant next year. One water body did try dredging, did not go very well. If you can imagine, it's such a messy operation, you can't capture all of them. They're this big, right? But a lot of times we're coaching groups to kind of wait a little bit so that when you are doing a removal, you're not having too much that it's unmanageable, but that there's enough there that it's worth it, right? So there is some value in kind of doing that a little earlier before it really starts going, but you still run into the problem of the bulbils are left, and so if you do it too early, it may regrow before the end of the boating season, and then you may want to look at a second event. So you want to split that difference pretty good, so you get a full summer out of one event. Okay, that's a really good question. I'd say most groups that are doing launch management typically once a year, maybe twice when they first get going, but Little Cedar Lake in Washington County has been doing diver hand removal at their launch since 18 or 19, and the pre-monitoring this year identified so little that we advised not to do removal. So there is some data to suggest positive returns on kind of that containment-based approach. Now the starry is still moving throughout the lake, but they're at least hopefully kind of flattening that curve, right? And that's something that I do want to be upfront about as well. You can, we've got our few points we've observed this year. You can expect starry stonewort to move more throughout the lake. These types of species, muskrasses, stoneworts, their ecologies, we call them early colonizers. So they excel at moving into uninvaded spaces quickly and kind of getting a foothold as they kind of grow like a carpet, right? So that is something you can expect, and I don't want you to, panic if in 3 years you see that it's in a lot of areas of the lake. That's not necessarily the end of the world. It is almost expected, and then ideally over time, we see that kind of hit, and then you kind of see it reach its carrying capacity or kind of equilibrium with the water body, kind of like what's been seen at height.
So it's at the bottom, you're not gonna see it floating on the top, it grows on.
Yeah, unless it's been uprooted somehow. It doesn't, its growth form isn't to hit the top and flower, like milfoil.
What is their most typical migration? I mean, is it,
How are they doing it? When are
Well-
they doing it? Yeah.
are they migrating in the July when they're coming up, or are they migrating in the fall when things are dying down?
Yeah, really good question. I think I would view it as less migrating and more creeping almost. Because there's kind of two modes. You're gonna have vegetative spread, so that's an existing patch getting bigger, right, over time. And maybe it gets bigger and maybe this edge comes in. There's a lot of different ways that can happen. And then there's also what I call like redispersal. So that would be a chunk, maybe a bulbil, getting physically moved to another spot and then starting a new patch. It's kind of twofold. I would say primarily in the summertime. Another thing to think about that Heidi and I talk about is anchors. When you're dropping an anchor down, hits the sediment, you bring it up, sometimes you clean it off, sometimes you don't, you go to your next fishing spot, drop it down. Well, what's in the sediment is bulbils, right? So that's an, outreach and educational type opportunity. You just mentioned you have fishing tournaments. That's a good thing to try and get in front of those folks and say, hey, we understand you're coming out to Lake Beulah. Can you guys please be really conscientious about your anchor management? We'd love to see you clean those off before you move to your next spot. Go a long way in helping our management goals. I've heard groups doing that. The angling community is usually pretty on board.
What kind of lake bottom does Pike Lake have? We have marl bottom, and so,
Very similar, yeah.
okay.
Honestly, most of our southeast Wisconsin, it's just all that limestone. it just precipitates out and forms that marl, which is quite honestly what Starry Stonewort is likes for its color.
So in the lakes that had more colonization,
Mhm.
so to speak, is there any correlation to the bottom
Like
being,
substrate,
yeah,
yeah,
bottom being disturbed?
that's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head if that's been correlated or looked at yet. It's a really good question though. Like bottom scouring essentially, yeah. Just thinking logically about it, if you have disturbance to the bottom, that makes sense to me.
Well, if we have it at the launch, you know, I worry about powered launching.
Of course,
or,
yeah.
you know,
That's why we preach
sort of-
launch maintenance, yeah.
Yeah, that sort of thing, wondering if that's what causes it to creep or.
I think any sort of vegetative growth that's gonna creep on its own is gonna be a lot slower than any human mediated transplant. That's fair to say. Really good question. Lots to chew on, I know. I'm here, as you guys work through things, call, email, we can set up conference calls, we can do whatever, that's what I'm here for, to contact you.
Are we allowed to get your phone number?
Yeah, I can just,
You wanna just
920.
yell it out right now?
yep, 920-400-9172,
920 what?
400-9172.
Thank you.
And that's my work cell, so anytime during the week, well, it's over there now, it's on.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much for.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for hearing me out. I am gonna jet, I've just got back from Green Bay the last 2 days, so I'm gonna run home and rest, but you guys know where to find me. Any questions, please reach out.
Much appreciated.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Are you in touch?
Yeah, thanks.
Good to meet you all as well.
Alright. I think, we should go directly to public comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to share their opinion with board members on any topic they choose, however,